Hello everyone and God bless you. Imagine holding in your hands a personal letter from God, written just for you. A letter that outlines His dreams for your life, His wisdom for your choices, and His love for your heart. That's exactly what the 10 Commandments are. Tonight, as you drift off to sleep, let's open this divine letter together. We'll explore each commandment, not as a list of do's and don'ts, but as a love letter from a father to his children, guiding us towards a life of purpose and peace. Before we begin, I would love it if you could leave a comment below to let me know where you are listening from in the world. Also remember to like the video and subscribe if you want to hear more like this. Okay, let's get comfy, relaxed, and let's begin. Picture yourself atop Mount Sinai, your heart pounding as you gaze at the scene unfolding before you. The air crackles with electricity, and thick clouds shroud the mountain's peak. Flashes of lightning illuminate the sky, painting a breathtaking display of divine power. As God's presence descends upon the mountain, the very ground beneath your feet trembles. The atmosphere is charged with an otherworldly energy, unlike anything you've ever experienced. The thunderous rumble echoes through your chest, a tangible reminder of the awesome might of the Creator. But then, in the midst of this incredible display, something unexpected happens. A profound silence falls over the mountain, so deep and sudden that it takes your breath away. This moment of quiet is more powerful than the loudest thunder, speaking volumes about the nature of God. He is not just in the grand displays of power, but also in the still, small voice that whispers to our hearts. As you stand there, surrounded by your fellow Israelites, you can feel the mix of emotions coursing through the crowd. There's fear, certainly. How could there not be in the face of such awesome power? But there's also a palpable sense of anticipation. After all the miracles you've witnessed, after the long journey from Egypt, you know that something truly extraordinary is about to happen. You find yourself wondering, why has God chosen to reveal Himself in this manner? Perhaps it's to demonstrate His unmatched power, to leave no doubt in your minds about His authority. Or maybe it's to prepare your hearts for the weight of the words He's about to share. This dramatic display serves as a vivid reminder that the God who led you out of slavery, who parted the Red Sea, is not a distant deity, but a living, active presence in your lives. As the silence stretches on, the anticipation builds. What could God possibly want to communicate that requires such an awe-inspiring introduction? You can feel it in your bones. Whatever is about to be revealed will change everything. It will shape not just your life, but the lives of generations to come. And then, breaking through the silence, you hear it, the voice of God Himself. This moment marks the beginning of something profound. God is about to share His commandments, His divine instructions for how to live in harmony with Him and with each other. These won't be arbitrary rules, but a blueprint for a life of purpose and meaning. As you stand there, poised on the edge of this momentous revelation, take a moment to reflect on the journey that brought you here. Remember the long days of travel through the wilderness, the challenges you faced, and the miracles you witnessed. All of it was leading to this moment, preparing you to receive these words from God. In the quiet of your heart, as you listen to God's voice, feel the weight of this moment. These commandments will be more than just rules. They will be a covenant, a sacred agreement between God and His people. They will guide you, protect you, and draw you closer to the One who brought you out of Egypt with a mighty hand. As we prepare to explore each of these commandments, let's carry with us the awe and reverence of this moment on Mount Sinai. Let's approach God's words not as a burden, but as a gift, a love letter from a father who wants the very best for his children. In the days to come, we'll unpack the deep wisdom and enduring relevance of these divine instructions, discovering how they can bring peace, purpose, and direction to our lives today. The thunder at Mount Sinai was deafening, but the journey to get there was filled with its own kind of noise. Close your eyes and picture the sounds of a nation on the move, the cries of babies, the bleating of sheep, and the whispered prayers of the faithful. What fears and hopes filled their hearts as they trudged through the wilderness. Imagine you're a young Israelite child, your small feet kicking up dust as you walk alongside your family. The hot sun beats down, and the desert stretches endlessly before you. You've heard stories of the miracles that freed your people from slavery in Egypt, the plagues, the parting of the Red Sea. But now, as you face the harsh realities of the journey, those miracles seem like distant dreams. Each day brings new challenges. The water runs low, and thirst becomes a constant companion. You watch as your parents' faces grow lined with worry, their eyes scanning the horizon for any sign of relief. But then, just when hope seems lost, a miracle occurs. Water gushes from a rock, quenching your thirst and reminding you of God's presence. Food becomes scarce, and hunger gnaws at your belly. The adults whisper longingly of the meals they ate in Egypt, forgetting for a moment the bitterness of their slavery. But then, as if in answer to your growling stomach, strange flakes appear on the ground, each morning manna, bread from heaven. You gather it with wonder, marveling at this daily reminder of God's provision. As you journey on, you begin to notice a change in the people around you. The fear and uncertainty that marked the early days of the Exodus slowly give way to something else. You see it in the way your father's shoulders straighten, in the newfound strength in your mother's voice. It's as if with each step away from Egypt, your people are shedding their identity as slaves and embracing their destiny as God's chosen ones. But the transformation isn't always smooth. There are moments of doubt, times when the enormity of the unknown future weighs heavily on everyone. You overhear heated arguments, see tears of frustration, witness moments of rebellion against Moses' leadership. Yet through it all, there's an underlying current of faith, a stubborn belief that the God who brought you out of Egypt will see you through to the promised land. As the days turn into weeks and the weeks into months, the landscape begins to change. The endless sea of sand gives way to rocky terrain, and in the distance, a mountain looms. You feel a shift in the atmosphere, a sense of anticipation rippling through the camp. This, you learn, is Mount Sinai, the place where God will meet with his people. Arriving at the base of the mountain, you're struck by a mix of emotions. There's relief at reaching this milestone, gratitude for having survived the journey thus far. But there's also uncertainty. What will happen here? What does God have in store for his people? As your family sets up camp in the shadow of the mountain, you can't help but feel that everything is about to change. The journey from slavery has been long and hard, but you sense that it was just the beginning. Something momentous awaits you here at Sinai, something that will shape not just your life, but the lives of generations to come. As night falls and the camp settles into an expectant hush, your thoughts turn to the days ahead. What preparations will be needed to meet with God? How will he choose to reveal himself? As you drift off to sleep, the mountain looms in your dreams, a silent sentinel holding the promise of divine encounter. As the first light of dawn breaks over Mount Sinai, a hush falls over the camp. The air feels heavy with expectation, charged with an energy that makes your skin tingle. What will it take to prepare for an encounter with the divine? The answer, as you're about to discover, goes far beyond physical cleanliness. Moses stands before the people, his face etched with the weight of responsibility. God has given him specific instructions for the Israelites to purify themselves. Consecrate yourselves, Moses tells the crowd, his voice carrying across the silent camp. Wash your garments and be ready by the third day. For on that day the Lord will come down on Mount Sinai in the sight of all the people. As you listen to Moses' words, you can feel a mixture of excitement and trepidation rippling through the crowd. The thought of meeting God face to face is both thrilling and terrifying. You watch as people begin to move with purpose, gathering water to wash their clothes and themselves. The purification rituals go beyond mere physical cleansing. As you participate, you begin to understand their deeper, symbolic meaning. The washing of garments represents a cleansing of your past, a shedding of the impurities gathered during your time in Egypt and the journey through the wilderness. It's a fresh start, a chance to stand before God with a clean slate. You notice how this time of preparation affects the camp. Voices are hushed, movements are more deliberate. There's a sense that every action, every thought, is being purified and made ready for God's presence. It's as if the entire community is holding its breath, waiting for the moment when God will speak. As you prepare your heart and mind, you reflect on the importance of this spiritual preparation. It's not just about following rules or going through motions. It's about aligning your whole being with the reality of meeting your Creator. You realize that this preparation is a gift, a chance to approach God with reverence and openness. The anticipation builds as the third day approaches. You can almost feel the air vibrating with expectation. What will it be like when God speaks directly to His people? How will His voice sound? What truths will He reveal? These questions swirl in your mind as you make your final preparations. On the morning of the third day, you wake to the sound of thunder and see flashes of lightning around the mountain. A thick cloud descends, and the blast of a trumpet echoes through the camp, growing louder and louder. Your heart races as Moses leads the people out of the camp to the foot of the mountain to meet with God. Standing there, trembling with awe and anticipation, you realize how the Israelites prepared to meet God at the mountain. It wasn't just about external cleansing, but about preparing their hearts to receive His words. The washing, the waiting, the reverent anticipation. All of it was a way of saying, "We are ready, Lord. Speak, for your servants are listening." As the mountain smokes and quakes at the presence of the Lord, you stand on the threshold of a moment that will change history. The air is electric with the knowledge that God is about to speak, to give His divine instructions to His people. And you, along with all of Israel, wait with bated breath to hear the voice of God and receive His commandments. The ground trembles beneath your feet as God's voice thunders from the mountain. His first words will shake the foundations of the ancient world. What could be so important that it takes precedence over all else? "I am the Lord your God, who brought you out of Egypt, out of the land of slavery. You shall have no other gods before me." These words echo across the wilderness, marking a revolutionary moment in human history. In a world where every aspect of life had its own deity, where cities and nations each claimed their own protectors, the God of Israel declares Himself the one and only. Imagine the weight of this command settling on the Israelites. For generations, they had lived in Egypt, surrounded by a pantheon of gods. The Nile had its deity, the sun was worshipped as Ra, and Pharaoh himself was considered divine. Now, standing at the foot of Mount Sinai, they are called to embrace a radically different worldview. This first commandment challenges not just their understanding of religion, but the very fabric of their reality. It asks them to see the world through new eyes, to recognize that behind every aspect of creation stands not a multitude of competing deities, but one supreme God. The God who parted the Red Sea, who provided manna in the wilderness, now reveals Himself as the sole object of their worship. Consider the implications of this commandment. It's not just about religious practices. It's about allegiance, trust, and the very foundation of their identity. By declaring Himself the only God, Yahweh is asking for their complete devotion. He's saying, "I alone am worthy of your worship. I alone can meet all your needs. I alone hold the power over every aspect of your lives." This exclusive devotion shapes the Israelites' identity in profound ways. No longer are they merely a group of escaped slaves. They are now the people of the one true God. This sets them apart from the nations around them, giving them a unique purpose and calling. Their worship, their laws, their very way of life will all stem from this foundational truth. There is one God, and He has chosen them. As you reflect on this commandment, feel the anticipation building. This is just the beginning. If this is how God starts His instructions, what will follow? How will this foundational command set the tone for the others? You can sense that each subsequent commandment will flow from this first one, all pointing back to the exclusive devotion God requires. What does this mean for our faith and relationships today? In a world that often asks us to divide our loyalties, to worship at the altars of success, pleasure, or personal fulfillment, this commandment calls us back to a singular focus. It reminds us that true peace, true purpose, comes from aligning our entire lives with God's will. This first commandment invites us into a relationship of trust and dependence. It challenges us to examine our hearts, to consider where we might be placing other gods before the one true God. Are we looking to our careers, our relationships, or our possessions to provide what only God can give. The call to exclusive devotion is as relevant now as it was on that day at Sinai. As the echo of God's voice fades, leaving a profound silence in its wake, you can feel the shift in the atmosphere. The Israelites, and you along with them, are beginning to grasp the magnitude of what's been declared. This is more than a rule. It's an invitation into a new way of seeing and living in the world. As we prepare to hear the second commandment, carry with you the weight and wonder of this first decree. God has declared himself unique and supreme. How will this shape the commands to follow? What more will he reveal about himself and his expectations for his people? The journey into understanding God's heart through his commandments has only just begun. As the echoes of God's first command fade, a new question arises. How do you worship a God you cannot see? The second commandment addresses this profound challenge, revealing a truth that would reshape the Israelites' entire concept of the divine. You shall not make for yourself an image in the form of anything in heaven above or on the earth beneath or in the waters below. You shall not bow down to them or worship them. These words must have struck the Israelites with both awe and confusion. Fresh from Egypt, a land where gods were represented in countless forms, they now face the task of connecting with an invisible deity. Picture yourself among the Israelites, your mind still reeling from the first commandment. The prohibition against creating and worshiping idols seems straightforward, but its implications run deep. This isn't just about avoiding carved statues. It's about resisting the very human urge to make God tangible, to bring him down to our level of understanding. Think about how natural it feels to want something you can see and touch to represent your faith. In Egypt, you could visit a temple and stand before a statue of Osiris or Isis. Felt concrete, real. But now, God is asking for something different, something that requires a profound shift in thinking. This commandment invites us to explore a deeper meaning of worship. It's not about creating physical representations of God, but about connecting with him in spirit and truth. Imagine the challenge this presented to the Israelites and indeed to us today. How do we relate to a God we cannot see? How do we direct our worship when there's no physical form to focus on? The beauty of this commandment lies in its protection of the purity of faith. By prohibiting physical representations, God ensures that our understanding of him isn't limited by human imagination or craftsmanship. He is greater than anything we could design or conceive. This commandment safeguards the mystery and majesty of God, preventing us from reducing him to something we can control or manipulate. As you ponder this, consider how it impacts our understanding of God's nature. He is spirit, beyond the confines of physical form. This commandment pushes us to seek him not through our eyes, but through our hearts and minds. It challenges us to develop a faith that goes beyond the visible, to trust in a God who is present even when we can't see him. How can we apply this commandment to our daily lives? In a world filled with visual stimuli, where we're constantly bombarded with images, this commandment calls us to look deeper. It invites us to find God in the intangible, in acts of love, in moments of quiet reflection, in the beauty of creation. It encourages us to cultivate a spiritual sensitivity that recognizes God's presence in every aspect of life. This commandment also warns us against modern-day idols. While we may not bow before golden statues, we often elevate other things to take God's place: success, relationships, material possessions. The second commandment reminds us to keep God at the center, to worship him alone rather than the gifts he gives. As the weight of this commandment settles on your heart, you can feel a shift in your understanding. Worship is no longer about what you can see, but about connecting with the unseen God who sees you. It's about cultivating a relationship based on faith, trust, and love. As we prepare to explore the third commandment, carry with you this newfound appreciation for true worship. How will God further reveal his character? What more will he ask of his people? The journey into the heart of God's law continues, each commandment building on the last, painting a picture of a life lived in harmony with the divine. The journey through God's law takes an unexpected turn as we approach the third commandment. Imagine a word so powerful that its mere utterance could change the course of history. Now, picture that word being yours to use, but with a warning attached. This is the essence of the commandment we're about to explore, one that challenges our understanding of language itself. In ancient Hebrew culture, God's name held a sacred power that's hard for us to fully grasp today. It wasn't just a label or a title, it was seen as an extension of God's very essence. The Israelites believed that to know and speak God's name was to have a direct connection to his power and presence. This reverence for the divine name was so deep that they would avoid speaking it aloud, using substitutes instead. Now, as you listen to God's voice thundering from Mount Sinai, you hear him say, "You shall not misuse the name of the Lord your God, for the Lord will not hold anyone guiltless who misuses his name." These words carry a weight that settles on your heart, inviting you to consider how you use language, especially when it comes to matters of faith. But what does it mean to misuse God's name? As you ponder this, you might realize it goes far beyond just avoiding certain words. It's about the intention behind our speech, the respect we show in our words and actions. Misusing God's name could mean making false promises in his name, using his name to manipulate others, or even claiming to speak for God when we're really just pushing our own agenda. Think about how often we hear God's name used carelessly in everyday conversation. It's become so common that we barely notice it anymore. But this commandment calls us to a higher standard. It asks us to be mindful of our words, to recognize the power they hold. When we speak of God, we're not just throwing around another name, we're invoking the Creator of the universe. As you reflect on this, you might start to see how our speech reflects our heart's attitude towards God. The way we use his name reveals something about our relationship with him. Do we treat it with reverence and respect, or do we toss it around carelessly? This commandment invites us to examine our hearts, to consider whether our words align with our faith. Imagine how this awareness could change your daily communication. Every time you speak of God, you might pause for a moment, considering the weight of his name. It's not about walking on eggshells, afraid to say the wrong thing. Instead, it's an opportunity to bring more intention and reverence into your speech. The spiritual truths we can gain from this commandment are profound. It teaches us about the power of words, the importance of integrity in our speech, and the deep respect we should have for the divine. It reminds us that our faith isn't just about big moments of worship, but about how we live and speak every day. As we prepare to move on to the fourth commandment, carry this new awareness with you. How might it change the way you pray, the way you speak about your faith, or even the way you think about God? The journey through God's law continues, each commandment building on the last, revealing more about the character of God and his desires for his people. Now, as we transition to the fourth commandment, we shift our focus from the power of words to the rhythm of life and worship. How will God's instructions shape not just our speech, but the very pattern of our days? Let's listen closely as God continues to unfold his plan for a life lived in harmony with him. God's plan for harmonious living takes an unexpected turn with the fourth commandment. We're about to explore a divine instruction that doesn't ask us to do more, but to do less. What if the secret to a fulfilling life isn't found in constant activity, but in purposeful stillness? Remember the Sabbath day by keeping it holy. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but the seventh day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. These words introduce us to the concept of the Sabbath, a day set apart for rest and worship. It's a revolutionary idea, especially in our fast-paced world where productivity often takes precedence over peace. Imagine how this commandment must have sounded to the Israelites, fresh from slavery in Egypt where rest was likely a rare luxury. God wasn't just suggesting they take a break. He was mandating it as part of their covenant relationship with him. This wasn't an optional day off, but a sacred obligation. The Sabbath challenges us to rethink our priorities. In a world that often equates busyness with importance, taking a full day to rest can feel almost rebellious. It goes against the grain of our achievement-oriented culture. Yet, this is precisely what God asks of us. He invites us to step off the treadmill of constant activity and remember what truly matters. But the benefits of this sacred rest go far beyond mere physical relaxation. Regular periods of rest can have profound effects on our physical, emotional, and spiritual well-being. When we pause our usual routines, we create space for reflection, for deepening relationships, and for reconnecting with God. It's a time to recharge, to gain perspective, and to remember our true identity as God's beloved children. The Sabbath also shapes community and family life in beautiful ways. Imagine a day when the whole community slows down together. Families spend time with each other without the distractions of work or errands. Neighbors have time to connect. The Sabbath creates a rhythm of communal rest and worship that strengthens social bonds and reinforces shared values. As you consider how this commandment might transform your weekly rhythms, think about the possibilities it opens up. What if you had a full day each week dedicated to rest, worship, and relationships? How might it change your perspective on work and productivity? How might it deepen your connection with God and others? Reflecting on this commandment can help us find inner calm in our often chaotic lives. It reminds us that our value doesn't come from what we produce, but from who we are as God's creation. The Sabbath teaches us to trust God's provision, that we can rest because He is in control. It offers us a weekly reset, a chance to realign our priorities and remember what truly matters. As we prepare to move on to the fifth commandment, notice how God's instructions are shifting. The first four commandments have focused on our relationship with God, how we worship Him, how we use His name, and now, how we honor His rhythm of work and rest. But as we turn to the next commandment, we'll see God's concern expand to include our relationships with others. How will the principles we've learned about honoring God translate into how we treat those around us? Let's listen closely as God continues to unfold His plan for a life of harmony and peace. As we shift our focus from honoring God to honoring others, we encounter a commandment that forms the bedrock of human society. The fifth commandment invites us to consider the very foundation of our relationships, starting with the family unit. Honor your father and your mother. God's voice echoes across the wilderness. These words carry deep significance in ancient Israelite culture, where respect for parents was seen as a cornerstone of a well-ordered society. Parents were viewed not just as caretakers, but as the primary teachers and transmitters of faith, values, and wisdom to the next generation. But what does it mean to honor our parents? As you ponder this question, you might find that the answer isn't always straightforward. This commandment challenges us to show respect, obedience, and care for our parents throughout our lives, not just in childhood. It asks us to value their wisdom, even when we might disagree with their opinions. Yet, we must acknowledge that applying this commandment can be complex in various family situations. What about those who have experienced abuse or neglect from their parents? How do we honor parents who have made serious mistakes or caused deep hurt? These questions remind us that honoring parents doesn't mean blindly accepting everything they do or say. Instead, it calls us to seek understanding, to offer forgiveness where possible, and to break cycles of hurt while still showing respect. As you reflect on this commandment, consider how it extends beyond just our relationship with our biological parents. In a broader sense, it teaches us about respecting authority and honoring elders in our communities. This principle shapes how we interact with teachers, mentors, and leaders, fostering a society built on mutual respect and acknowledgement of wisdom gained through experience. This commandment has the power to strengthen family and community bonds in profound ways. When children honor their parents, and parents live lives worthy of honor, it creates a cycle of respect and love that can heal generational wounds and build stronger families. This ripple effect extends outward, contributing to more stable and harmonious communities. Imagine how our relationships might deepen if we truly embraced this commandment. It invites us to listen more attentively to those who have gone before us, to seek reconciliation where there's been hurt, and to express gratitude for the sacrifices made on our behalf. This commandment challenges us to move beyond self-centeredness and recognize the interconnectedness of our lives with those who have shaped us. As we prepare to move on to the sixth commandment, carry with you this renewed appreciation for the importance of honoring those who have guided and shaped your life. Consider how you might apply this principle not just to your parents, but to all those who have played a parental role in your journey. The next commandment will take us into even deeper waters, addressing the sanctity of human life itself. As we transition, reflect on how the respect for parents and elders taught in the fifth commandment lays a foundation for valuing all human life. How might honoring those who gave us life prepare us to honor the gift of life in all its forms? Let's listen closely as God continues to unfold his vision for a world marked by respect, love, and the honoring of every human being. From honoring those who gave us life, we now turn to a commandment that speaks to the very essence of existence itself. Imagine a world where every person truly believed in the sanctity of human life. How would our society transform if we fully embraced this divine principle? You shall not murder. These 4 simple words carry profound implications for how we value and protect human life. At first glance, this commandment might seem straightforward. Don't take another person's life. But as we reflect more deeply, we begin to see how far-reaching this principle truly is. God's prohibition against murder goes beyond just the physical act of ending a life. It speaks to the inherent worth of every human being, created in the image of God. This commandment calls us to respect and preserve life in all its forms, from the unborn to the elderly, from the healthy to the sick. As you ponder this, consider how this commandment shapes our ethical decisions in society. It influences our laws, our healthcare systems, and our treatment of the most vulnerable among us. It challenges us to look beyond our differences and see the divine spark in every person we encounter. But the implications of this commandment extend even further. It's not just about refraining from physical harm, but about actively promoting life and well-being. It calls us to speak up against injustice, to care for those in need, and to create a society where every life is valued and protected. Think about how understanding this commandment might impact your daily choices. How might it change the way you treat the people around you? Perhaps it means showing kindness to a stranger, offering support to someone who's struggling, or standing up for those who can't defend themselves. This commandment also challenges us to examine our hearts. Jesus taught that anger and hatred towards others are the roots of murder. By addressing these inner attitudes, we can cultivate a deeper respect for life and create more peaceful relationships. As we prepare to move on to the 7th commandment, carry with you this renewed appreciation for the sanctity of human life. Consider how this principle of preserving and respecting life might extend to other areas of our relationships. How might it shape the way we love and remain faithful to one another? God's commandments continue to unfold, each one building upon the last, revealing more of his heart for humanity. As we transition to exploring fidelity in relationships, let's reflect on how this deep respect for life forms the foundation for all our interactions with others. How might valuing every life as sacred influence the way we approach our closest relationships? Let's listen closely as God's wisdom guides us towards a life of love, respect, and faithfulness. Imagine a love so pure and faithful that it mirrors God's unwavering commitment to us. As we explore the 7th commandment, we encounter a principle that speaks to the very heart of our relationships. You shall not commit adultery, God declares, inviting us to consider the profound significance of faithfulness in our lives. This commandment goes far beyond a simple prohibition. It calls us to reflect on the nature of love itself, challenging us to embody the kind of steadfast devotion that God shows to his people. As you ponder these words, consider how they might transform your approach to relationships, not just in marriage, but in all areas of life. In a world filled with temptations and distractions, maintaining fidelity can be challenging. We're constantly bombarded with messages that prioritize personal pleasure over commitment, instant gratification over long-term faithfulness. Yet, this commandment reminds us that true fulfillment comes from deep, loyal relationships built on trust and mutual respect. As you reflect on this, think about how faithfulness extends beyond the boundaries of marriage. It applies to our friendships, our family relationships, and even our commitments to our communities. Being faithful means being reliable, trustworthy, and consistent in our love and support for others. It means showing up when we're needed, keeping our promises, and standing by those we care about through both good times and bad. This commandment serves as a protective barrier for families and communities. When we honor our commitments and remain faithful to our loved ones, we create a stable foundation for growth and flourishing. Children thrive in environments where they can trust in the constancy of their parents' love. Communities grow stronger when members can rely on each other's loyalty and support. Consider how embracing this principle of faithfulness could transform your approach to relationships. Imagine the depth of connection that could develop if you committed to being truly present and loyal in all your interactions. How might your friendships deepen? How might your family bonds strengthen? How might your community benefit from your unwavering support? The lessons we can learn about commitment from this commandment are profound. It teaches us that love is not just a feeling, but a choice we make every day. It shows us that true intimacy and trust are built over time through consistent acts of faithfulness. It reminds us that our actions have ripple effects, impacting not just our immediate relationships but the wider circles of our communities. As we prepare to move on to the eighth commandment, carry with you this renewed appreciation for the power of faithfulness. Consider how the principle of respecting and honoring our commitments might extend to how we treat others' property and possessions. How might the loyalty we show in our relationships translate into respect for what belongs to others? God's wisdom continues to unfold, each commandment building upon the last to paint a picture of a life lived in harmony with Him and with others. As we transition to exploring respect for others' property, let's reflect on how this commitment to faithfulness forms the foundation for all our interactions. How might valuing loyalty and trust influence the way we approach ownership and respect for what belongs to others? Let's listen closely as God's guidance leads us towards a life of integrity in all areas. As we've seen, God's commandments often reach far beyond their simple words. Now, we encounter a divine instruction that seems straightforward at first glance, but holds the power to transform our entire approach to life and relationships. What does "you shall not steal" really mean in a world where taking can be as subtle as a mouse click? Imagine a society where trust forms the foundation of every interaction. A place where people respect not just the physical possessions of others, but also their time, their ideas, and their efforts. This is the vision behind the eighth commandment. It's not just about refraining from theft. It's an invitation to build a community based on mutual respect and integrity. When we hear "you shall not steal," our minds might jump to obvious examples like shoplifting or burglary. But as you ponder this commandment, consider the many subtle ways we might be tempted to take what isn't ours. Have you ever been tempted to use company resources for personal projects? Or perhaps you've downloaded music or movies without paying for them. These actions might seem harmless, but they too fall under the umbrella of stealing. The eighth commandment challenges us to examine our hearts and our actions closely. It calls us to be people of honesty and integrity in all our dealings, big and small. Think about how this principle might change the way you approach your work, your finances, or even your use of time. When we commit to respecting what belongs to others, we create an atmosphere of trust that strengthens our relationships and our communities. Consider how this commandment fosters trust in society. When people know they can rely on others to respect their property and rights, it opens the door for deeper connections and more fruitful collaborations. Businesses can flourish when partners trust each other. Neighborhoods become safer and more welcoming when residents look out for one another's property. Even online communities thrive when members respect intellectual property and give credit where it's due. But the principle of respecting what belongs to others extends far beyond material possessions. It applies to intangible things as well. Respecting someone's time by being punctual, honoring their ideas by giving proper credit, and valuing their emotional boundaries are all ways we can live out this commandment. As you reflect on this, think about how you might apply this principle in your daily interactions. How might it change the way you treat your coworkers, your family members, or even strangers you encounter? Applying this commandment in our lives can profoundly improve our relationships. When we consistently show respect for what belongs to others, we build a reputation for trustworthiness. People feel safe around us, knowing that their possessions, their ideas, and their boundaries will be honored. This creates a foundation for deeper, more meaningful connections. Imagine how your friendships might grow if everyone involved knew they could trust each other completely. Consider how family dynamics might improve if every member felt their personal space and belongings were respected. As we prepare to explore the ninth commandment, carry with you this renewed appreciation for honesty and respect in all your dealings. The principles we've discovered here, trust, integrity, and mutual respect, set the stage for our next topic, the power of truthful speech. How might the respect we show for others' property extend to how we use our words? Let's listen closely as God's wisdom continues to unfold, guiding us toward a life of integrity in both actions and speech. From tangible possessions, we now turn to something equally valuable yet often overlooked: the truth. Imagine a world where every word spoken was guaranteed to be honest. How would your relationships change? As we delve into the 9th commandment, prepare to uncover the hidden ways dishonesty creeps into our daily lives and the transformative power of embracing truth in all our communications. You shall not bear false witness against your neighbor. These words, spoken by God on Mount Sinai, carry a weight that extends far beyond the courtroom. This commandment invites us to consider the power of our words in every aspect of our lives. Think about how often we encounter situations where the truth feels uncomfortable or inconvenient. Maybe it's a white lie to avoid hurting someone's feelings, or an exaggeration to make ourselves look better. These might seem harmless, but they chip away at the foundation of trust in our relationships. As you reflect on this commandment, consider the various ways we might be tempted to bend the truth. Perhaps it's gossip, sharing information about others that we're not certain is true. Or maybe it's the omission of important details that paint a misleading picture. Even remaining silent when we know the truth can sometimes be a form of false witness. Each of these actions, however small they might seem, has the potential to cause harm and erode trust. Honesty plays a crucial role in maintaining healthy relationships and a functional society. When we speak the truth, we create an environment of trust and openness. People feel safe to be vulnerable, knowing that they won't be deceived or manipulated. In our families, honesty fosters deeper connections and understanding. In our workplaces, it promotes collaboration and innovation. In our communities, it builds a sense of unity and shared purpose. Our commitment to truthfulness reflects our character and integrity. When we choose to speak the truth, even when it's difficult, we demonstrate our respect for others and our own moral strength. It shows that we value integrity over personal gain or comfort. Think about the people in your life whom you trust implicitly. Chances are, their unwavering commitment to honesty is a key factor in why you hold them in such high regard. Imagine how this principle could transform your communication. What if you approached every conversation with a commitment to absolute truthfulness? It might feel challenging at first, but the rewards could be profound. You might find your relationships deepening as people recognize your reliability and openness. You might experience a sense of inner peace, no longer burdened by the weight of deception. You might even inspire others to embrace honesty in their own lives, creating a ripple effect of truthfulness in your community. This commandment shapes our interactions with others in powerful ways. It calls us to be mindful of our words, to speak with care and consideration. It encourages us to seek truth and to stand up for it, even when it's unpopular. By embracing this principle, we contribute to a world where trust and integrity are valued above all else. As we prepare to explore the 10th commandment, carry with you this renewed appreciation for the power of truthful speech. Consider how the honesty we practice in our words relates to the desires of our hearts. How might cultivating truthfulness prepare us to address the root of many sins? Covetousness? Let's listen closely as God's wisdom continues to unfold, guiding us toward a life of integrity in both our words and our deepest longings. The 10th commandment invites us to explore a profound truth about human nature and the secret to lasting contentment. Imagine finding true satisfaction in what you have, free from the burden of endless wanting. This final commandment addresses something deeper than our actions. It speaks to the very desires of our hearts. You shall not covet, God declares, addressing a struggle we all face. This commandment is unique among the 10, focusing not on what we do, but on what we want. It challenges us to examine our inner motivations, the longings that often drive our choices and actions. Covetousness, the intense desire for something that belongs to someone else, often lies at the root of many other sins. Think about it, how many times has envy led to dishonesty, theft, or even broken relationships. When we constantly compare ourselves to others and crave what they have, we open the door to a host of negative emotions and behaviors. In our materialistic world, cultivating contentment can feel like swimming against a strong current. We're bombarded with messages telling us we need more: the latest gadget, a bigger house, a more prestigious job. Social media amplifies this struggle, presenting carefully curated glimpses into others' lives that can leave us feeling inadequate and wanting. But this commandment offers us a different path. It invites us to find peace and joy in what we already have, to cultivate gratitude for our blessings rather than fixating on what we lack. This doesn't mean we can't have goals or work to improve our lives. Instead, it's about finding a balance between ambition and contentment, between striving for growth and appreciating our present circumstances. By addressing our inner motivations, this commandment gets to the heart of many of our struggles. When we learn to be content, we free ourselves from the exhausting cycle of comparison and envy. We can celebrate others' successes without feeling diminished. We can find joy in simple pleasures without constantly craving more. Imagine how this principle could transform your life. What if you woke up each morning grateful for what you have instead of immediately thinking about what you want? How might your relationships improve if you weren't constantly comparing yourself to others? Consider the peace that could fill your heart when you're no longer driven by the need to acquire more and more. Meditating on this commandment can bring a deep sense of peace to our lives. It encourages us to shift our focus from what we lack to what we have, from what others possess to the unique blessings in our own lives. This change in perspective can lead to greater contentment, reduced stress, and a more joyful approach to life. As we reflect on this final commandment, we see how it beautifully ties together all that came before it. By cultivating contentment, we're less likely to steal, to lie, to disrespect others, or to neglect our relationship with God. It brings us full circle, back to the first commandment's call to put God first in our lives. As we prepare to reflect on the overall impact of the 10 Commandments, carry with you this renewed appreciation for the power of contentment. These divine instructions aren't just rules to follow, but a pathway to a life of peace, integrity, and deep satisfaction. Let's consider how embracing these principles can transform not just our individual lives, but our families, communities, and the world around us. As we reflect on the 10 Commandments, we begin to see a beautiful portrait of God's character emerging. Each commandment, like a brushstroke on canvas, reveals a different aspect of his nature. Let's take a moment to explore how these laws show us who God truly is. The first commandment, calling us to have no other gods before him, speaks of God's uniqueness and supremacy. He is not one among many, but the one true God. This reveals his sovereignty over all creation. The second commandment, prohibiting idols, shows us that God is spirit, beyond any physical representation we could create. He is transcendent, yet desires a personal relationship with us. In the third commandment, we see God's holiness. His name is sacred, reflecting his perfect nature. The fourth commandment, establishing the Sabbath, reveals God as our Creator who values rest and renewal. He cares for our well-being, inviting us into his rhythm of work and rest. The commandment to honor our parents shows God's heart for family and respect for authority. He is a God of order and wisdom, establishing structures that nurture and protect us. In the prohibition against murder, we see God's high value for human life. Every person bears his image, precious in his sight. The commandment against adultery reveals God's faithfulness and his desire for our faithfulness in relationships. He is a covenant-keeping God, loyal and true. In the command not to steal, we see God's justice and his concern for the rights of others. He is fair and desires fairness among his people. The ninth commandment, forbidding false witness, shows us that God is truth. He values honesty and integrity in our words and actions. Finally, the commandment against coveting reveals God's sufficiency. He is enough for us, able to satisfy our deepest longings. As we ponder these commandments, we might notice a tension. On one hand, they reveal God's perfect justice. He sets a high standard, showing us what righteousness looks like. Yet, woven throughout these laws, we also see God's deep love for his people. These aren't arbitrary rules, but guidelines for our flourishing. They protect us, nurture our relationships, and draw us closer to him. Understanding God's character through these commandments deepens our appreciation for them. They're not just a list of do's and don'ts, but a revelation of who God is and how he wants us to live. When we see the heart behind the law, it transforms our obedience from mere duty to a loving response to a good father. These laws also reveal God's desire for relationship with us. He didn't just create us and leave us to figure things out on our own. Instead, he gave us clear guidance, showing us how to live in harmony with him and with each other. The commandments are an invitation to know God more deeply, to align our hearts with his. As we embrace this understanding, it can transform our view of God. No longer do we see him as a distant lawgiver, but as a loving father who wants the best for his children. We begin to trust his wisdom, knowing that his commands come from a heart of love and a desire for our good. How does this understanding of the 10 Commandments deepen our relationship with God? It invites us into a more intimate knowledge of his character. As we meditate on each commandment, we can pray, "Lord, show me more of who you are through this." It encourages us to trust his guidance, knowing it comes from his perfect nature. And it inspires our obedience, not out of fear, but out of love for the one who first loved us. As we conclude our reflection on the Divine Lawgiver, let's carry this renewed appreciation for God's character with us. In our next exploration, we'll consider the role of Moses in this divine encounter. How did God use this humble shepherd to deliver these eternal truths? Let's discover together the importance of human partnership in God's divine plan. Imagine Moses standing atop Mount Sinai, his weathered hands grasping the stone tablets. The weight of these divine inscriptions is nothing compared to the responsibility resting on his shoulders. As the mediator between God and the Israelites, Moses finds himself in a position both awe-inspiring and daunting. Moses' role in receiving and sharing the 10 Commandments was unique. He alone ascended the mountain to meet with God, enveloped in clouds and thunder. In those sacred moments, Moses listened intently as God spoke, carefully etching each commandment into stone and into his heart. But his task didn't end there. He was then entrusted with the profound responsibility of conveying these divine instructions to the people waiting anxiously below. Consider the immense pressure Moses must have felt. He wasn't just delivering a message. He was bridging the gap between the infinite and the finite, between the holy and the human. Every word, every gesture, every explanation mattered. The future of the Israelite nation hung on his ability to faithfully communicate God's laws and help the people understand their significance. Yet, Moses' life had been preparing him for this moment in ways he might not have realized. His upbringing in Pharaoh's court gave him leadership skills and the ability to speak with authority. His years as a shepherd taught him patience and humility. Even his initial reluctance to answer God's call at the burning bush had strengthened his dependence on divine guidance. All these experiences converged, equipping Moses for this crucial role as mediator. Moses' position as a spiritual leader and mediator offers valuable insights for us today. It reminds us that leadership often involves standing in the gap, helping others connect with God's truth. It requires a delicate balance of courage and humility, of speaking boldly while remaining acutely aware of one's own limitations. As we reflect on Moses' example, we can draw inspiration for modern spiritual leadership. Like Moses, today's leaders are called to listen closely to God's voice, to internalize his truths, and then to share them faithfully with others. They must be willing to stand firm in the face of challenges, to persevere when the path is difficult, and to continually point others toward God. So what exactly was Moses' role in receiving and sharing the commandments? He was more than just a messenger. Moses was a bridge, a teacher, and a living example. He received God's laws with reverence, internalized them deeply, and then worked tirelessly to help the Israelites understand and embrace these divine instructions. His faithful mediation laid the foundation for the Israelites' covenant relationship with God. As we turn our attention to the Israelites' response to receiving the commandments, let's carry with us the image of Moses descending the mountain, tablets in hand, ready to guide his people into a new era of their relationship with God. How would they react to these divine instructions? Would they embrace them as eagerly as Moses had? Let's explore together the profound impact of this moment on the hearts and minds of God's chosen people. As the Israelites gathered at the foot of Mount Sinai, a mix of awe, fear, and reverence filled the air. The mountain trembled, smoke billowed up, and thunder rumbled. Imagine the scene: thousands of people, their hearts pounding, as they heard God's voice for the first time. At first, the people were overwhelmed. They trembled and stood at a distance, saying to Moses, "Speak to us yourself, and we will listen. But do not have God speak to us, or we will die." Their initial reaction was one of fear and unworthiness. They felt the immense gap between their human frailty and God's holiness. Yet, alongside this fear was a deep sense of wonder. For the first time, they were experiencing a direct encounter with the divine. This wasn't just another miracle like the parting of the Red Sea or manna from heaven. This was God himself speaking to them, giving them his laws. As Moses reassured them, explaining that God had come to test them and keep them from sinning, a transformation began to take place. The Israelites started to realize that this encounter wasn't just about rules, it was about relationship. God was inviting them into a covenant, a special bond between Creator and created. This moment marked a profound shift in the Israelites' identity. No longer were they just a group of former slaves wandering in the desert. They were now a chosen people, set apart for a special purpose. God's laws weren't meant to burden them, but to shape them into a holy nation, a light to the surrounding peoples. As the initial fear subsided, a sense of privilege and responsibility began to grow. The Israelites recognized that they had been given something precious: direct guidance from God himself. This shaped not just their individual faith, but their entire community. They now had a shared experience, a common foundation on which to build their society. The impact of this divine encounter rippled through every aspect of Israelite life. It influenced their worship, their social structures, and their daily routines. The Ten Commandments provided a framework for their relationships with God, with each other, and with the world around them. Moreover, this moment set the stage for Israel's future relationship with God. It established a pattern of divine revelation and human response that would continue throughout their history. The Israelites learned that God was not distant and unreachable, but a God who desired to communicate with his people. Receiving the Ten Commandments changed the Israelites in profound ways. It gave them a clear moral compass, a sense of divine purpose, and a unique identity as God's chosen people. It instilled in them a reverence for God's holiness and a recognition of their need for his guidance. As we reflect on this pivotal moment in Israel's history, we can't help but wonder about its lasting impact. How would these commandments shape not just the Israelites, but generations to come? How would they influence legal systems, moral philosophies, and religious practices across cultures and centuries? This encounter at Sinai was more than just a historical event. It was a defining moment that would echo through the ages. As we turn our attention to the enduring legacy of the Ten Commandments, let's consider how these ancient words continue to resonate in our world today. The Ten Commandments echo through time, a covenant between God and his people that remains as relevant today as it was thousands of years ago. These ancient words, etched in stone, form a bridge between the divine and the human, offering guidance that transcends cultures and eras. When God gave these commandments to the Israelites, he wasn't just handing down a list of rules. He was establishing a covenant, a sacred agreement that would shape their relationship with him and with each other. This covenant was meant to set them apart, to make them a light to the nations around them. But how do we apply these ancient laws in our modern world? It's a question that has challenged believers for centuries. Our society looks very different from the one in which these commandments were first given. We face new ethical dilemmas, complex situations that the ancient Israelites could never have imagined. Yet, the principles underlying these commands remain unchanging. They speak to fundamental aspects of human nature and our relationship with God. The call to honor God above all else, to respect life, to be faithful in our relationships, to speak truth, and to be content with what we have. These are timeless principles that apply just as much in our digital age as they did in the ancient world. Throughout history, these commandments have profoundly shaped moral and legal systems across cultures. They've influenced the development of ethical codes and laws in societies far beyond ancient Israel. From the Magna Carta to modern human rights declarations, we can trace the impact of these divine instructions. The first four commandments, focusing on our relationship with God, remind us of the importance of spiritual values in a world that often prioritizes the material. They challenge us to consider what we truly worship in our lives. Is it career success, financial security, social status, or do we place God at the center of our existence? The remaining 6 commandments, addressing our relationships with others, provide a framework for building just and harmonious societies. They teach us to respect authority, value human life, honor our commitments, respect others' rights and property, speak truthfully, and cultivate contentment. These principles are as crucial for healthy communities today as they were in ancient times. The universal nature of these commands speaks to their divine origin. They address core aspects of human nature that remain constant across time and culture. The temptation to lie, to covet what others have, to disrespect authority. These are struggles we still face today. The 10 Commandments offer timeless wisdom for navigating these challenges. As we consider the relevance of these commandments in our lives today, we might ask ourselves, how can these ancient words guide us in our use of social media? How do they inform our approach to work-life balance? How can they help us navigate complex ethical decisions in our careers or personal lives? The 10 Commandments remain relevant because they speak to the deepest needs of the human heart, our need for connection with God, for meaningful relationships with others, for a moral compass to guide our choices. They offer a path to freedom, not freedom from all constraints, but freedom to live in harmony with our Creator and with each other. As we prepare to explore how we can apply these commandments in our daily lives, let's remember that they are more than just rules. They are an invitation to a way of life that brings peace, purpose, and deep satisfaction. They challenge us to align our hearts and actions with God's will, offering a timeless blueprint for a life well lived. Imagine waking up each morning with a renewed sense of purpose, guided by timeless principles that bring peace to your heart and harmony to your relationships. This is the promise of living out the 10 Commandments in our daily lives. Let's explore how we can weave these divine instructions into the fabric of our modern world. The first commandment invites us to put God at the center of our lives. In a world filled with distractions, this might mean starting each day with prayer or meditation, reminding ourselves of God's love and guidance. It could also involve being mindful of how we spend our time and energy, ensuring that our priorities align with our faith. Honoring God's name, as the third commandment instructs, goes beyond avoiding profanity. It calls us to speak of God with reverence and to represent Him well in our words and actions. This might mean being careful about how we present our faith on social media or striving to be a positive example in our workplaces and communities. The Sabbath commandment reminds us of the importance of rest and worship. In our busy lives, setting aside a day for spiritual renewal and family time can be challenging but deeply rewarding. It might involve turning off our devices, sharing a meal with loved ones, or attending a worship service. Honoring our parents takes on new meaning as we grow older. It might involve caring for aging parents, seeking their wisdom, or working to heal past hurts. Even if our relationships with our parents are complicated, we can honor the principle by showing respect to those in authority and cherishing family bonds. The commandment against murder calls us to value all human life. In our daily lives, this extends to treating others with kindness and respect, standing against bullying and discrimination, and working for justice in our communities. It challenges us to consider how our words and actions might hurt or heal others. Faithfulness in relationships, as commanded in the prohibition against adultery, is about more than just marital fidelity. It calls us to be loyal and trustworthy in all our relationships, keeping our promises and being people of integrity. The commandment against stealing reminds us to respect others' property and rights. In our digital age, this might mean being careful about copyright infringement, giving credit for others' ideas, or being honest in our expense reports at work. Speaking truthfully, as the ninth commandment instructs, is crucial for building trust in our relationships and communities. This challenges us to be honest in our communication, to avoid gossip and exaggeration, and to have the courage to stand up for truth even when it's difficult. Finally, the commandment against coveting invites us to cultivate contentment. In a culture that constantly tells us we need more, choosing gratitude for what we have can bring profound peace. This might involve practicing mindfulness, keeping a gratitude journal, or finding ways to give back to others. Living out these commandments isn't always easy in our complex world. We face daily challenges and temptations that test our commitment. Yet, as we strive to align our lives with God's will, we often find that obedience brings unexpected blessings. We may discover deeper relationships, greater peace of mind, and a stronger sense of purpose. As you reflect on these ancient yet timeless principles, consider how you might incorporate them more fully into your life. The journey of faith is ongoing, and each small step towards living out God's commandments can lead to profound personal and spiritual growth. May you find peace and purpose as you seek to follow God's guidance in your daily life. As we seek to follow God's guidance, a profound question emerges. Is there a single principle that ties all these commandments together? Jesus offers an answer that might surprise you, one that transforms our entire understanding of God's law. When asked about the greatest commandment, Jesus didn't hesitate. He replied, "Love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind." But he didn't stop there. He added a second commandment, equally important: love your neighbor as yourself. In these two simple statements, Jesus captured the essence of all the law and the prophets. This teaching invites us to look beyond the letter of the law to its very heart. It's not just about following rules, but about cultivating a deep, abiding love for God and for others. This love isn't just an emotion. It's a choice, an action, a way of life that shapes everything we do. Think about how this perspective changes our approach to the Ten Commandments. When we love God with all our heart, soul, and mind, honoring Him becomes natural. We don't worship other gods because our hearts are full of love for the one true God. We don't misuse His name because we cherish our relationship with Him. We keep the Sabbath as a joyful opportunity to spend time with the one we love. Similarly, when we truly love our neighbors as ourselves, we naturally fulfill the commandments that govern our relationships. We honor our parents out of love and respect. We don't murder, steal, or bear false witness because we genuinely care for others' well-being. We don't commit adultery or covet because we value the happiness of others as much as our own. Understanding the heart of the law transforms our approach to obedience. It's no longer about following rules out of fear or duty, but about expressing love through our actions. This doesn't make the commandments less important. Rather, it infuses them with deeper meaning and purpose. Consider how this perspective might renew your appreciation for the commandments. Instead of seeing them as restrictions, you might begin to view them as guidelines for expressing love. Each commandment becomes an opportunity to demonstrate your love for God and for others in tangible ways. The relationship between love, faith, and following God's will is beautifully intertwined. Our faith in God's goodness and love for us inspires us to love Him in return. This love then motivates us to follow His will, not out of obligation, but out of a desire to please the one we love. As we follow His commandments, our faith and love grow stronger, creating a beautiful cycle of spiritual growth. As you reflect on this, you might find your entire approach to the commandments shifting. Rather than asking, "What am I not allowed to do?" you might start asking, "How can I best express my love for God and others in this situation?" This subtle shift can bring new life and joy to your spiritual journey. In the end, love truly is the ultimate fulfillment of all the commandments. It's the thread that weaves them all together into a beautiful tapestry of faith and obedience. As we conclude our exploration of the Ten Commandments, let's carry this truth with us. At their core, these ancient laws are all about love for God, love for others, and even love for ourselves as God's precious creation. The 10 Commandments, etched in stone by God's own hand, stand as a powerful symbol of his covenant with his people. Picture these tablets, rough-hewn yet bearing the perfect script of the divine. They are more than just slabs of rock. They are tangible reminders of an intangible, eternal agreement between God and humanity. As you imagine these stone tablets, consider their significance as a memorial. Throughout history, people have created physical markers to remember important events or promises. The 10 Commandments serve this purpose on a grand scale. They are a constant, unchanging reminder of God's expectations and his commitment to his people. We humans often need tangible reminders of spiritual truths. Our faith can sometimes feel abstract, especially in moments of doubt or difficulty. Physical symbols like the stone tablets anchor our beliefs in the realm of the concrete. They give us something to see and touch, helping to bridge the gap between the spiritual and the physical worlds. These physical reminders can have a profound impact on our actions and choices. Imagine the Israelites carrying these stone tablets with them as they journeyed through the wilderness. The presence of these commandments would have been a constant guide, influencing their decisions and shaping their community. In the same way, the symbols and reminders we keep in our lives can help steer us towards living out our faith. The power of remembrance in spiritual growth cannot be overstated. When we actively recall God's words and deeds, we strengthen our faith and deepen our relationship with him. The stone tablets served as a trigger for the Israelites to remember not just the laws, but the awesome experience of God's presence on Mount Sinai. As you reflect on this, consider how you might create your own stones of remembrance in your life. These don't have to be literal stones, of course. They could be photos, scripture verses posted on your wall, or meaningful objects that remind you of God's presence and promises. What symbols or reminders could you incorporate into your daily life to keep God's word at the forefront of your mind? The Sinai experience offers us profound spiritual truths. It teaches us that God desires to communicate with us, to guide us in how to live. It shows us the importance of having physical reminders of spiritual realities. And it demonstrates that remembering God's words and deeds is crucial for our spiritual growth and for maintaining our covenant relationship with him. As we prepare to make our final return to Mount Sinai in our narrative journey, carry with you the image of these stone tablets. Let them remind you of the enduring nature of God's covenant, the importance of his commandments, and his desire for a close relationship with his people. In our next moments together, we'll stand once again at the foot of the mountain, reflecting on how this pivotal moment continues to shape our faith today. Have you ever experienced a moment of profound spiritual connection, only to find yourself back in the routines of everyday life? Mount Sinai, once alive with God's presence, now stands silent. Yet, this quiet holds secrets about our own spiritual journeys that might surprise you. As we return to Mount Sinai, imagine the scene before you. The thunderous voice of God has fallen silent. The lightning that once illuminated the sky has ceased. The thick smoke that shrouded the mountain's peak has dissipated. What remains is a serene landscape, bathed in the soft light of dawn. The mountain, once trembling with divine power, now stands still and quiet. This stark contrast between the earlier dramatic encounter and the current tranquility is striking. Where once there was fear and awe, now there is a sense of peace. The air, previously charged with electricity, now carries a gentle breeze. The Israelites, who once stood trembling at the foot of the mountain, have returned to their camp, carrying with them the weight of their encounter with God. As you gaze upon this quiet mountain, reflect on how encounters with God leave lasting impressions on our souls. Just as Mount Sinai was forever changed by God's presence, so too are we transformed by our experiences with the divine. These moments shape us, leaving an indelible mark on our hearts and minds. Think about a time when you felt especially close to God. Perhaps it was during a worship service, in a moment of prayer, or while surrounded by the beauty of nature. Remember how that experience made you feel, the sense of awe, the feeling of being loved and known by your Creator. Even though that moment has passed, its impact remains with you. Yet, we can't always live on the mountaintop. Our lives often follow a cyclical pattern of spiritual highs and everyday routines. After intense encounters with God, we often find ourselves back in the valleys of daily life. This is a normal part of our spiritual journey. Just as the Israelites had to come down from Mount Sinai and continue their journey, we too must learn to carry our mountaintop experiences into our everyday lives. But here's an encouraging thought. God isn't confined to mountaintops or dramatic displays. He's present in the quiet moments too. As you go about your day, be open to encountering God in unexpected places. He might speak to you through a friend's kind word, a beautiful sunset, or a moment of stillness in your busy day. How can reflecting on this biblical moment help us find inner calm? It reminds us that even after the most intense spiritual experiences, there comes a time of quiet reflection. In these moments of stillness, we can process what we've learned and allow it to sink deep into our hearts. The quiet mountain teaches us that peace often follows times of spiritual intensity. Moreover, it encourages us to find God in the everyday moments of our lives. While we may not always experience dramatic encounters like the Israelites at Mount Sinai, we can cultivate awareness of God's presence in our daily routines. This can bring a sense of peace and purpose to even the most ordinary days. As we prepare to conclude our journey through the 10 Commandments, carry with you this image of the quiet mountain. Let it remind you that God is present not just in the dramatic moments, but in the quiet ones too. In our final reflections, we'll explore how these ancient words continue to shape our lives today, guiding us towards a deeper relationship with God and with each other. As we reach the end of our journey through the 10 Commandments, let's pause to reflect on the timeless wisdom and love they contain. These ancient words, given by God to guide His people, still speak to our hearts today. They remind us of God's deep care for us and His desire for us to live in harmony with Him and each other. In your daily life, remember that God is always near, ready to guide and comfort you. When you face difficult choices or feel lost, turn to His commandments. They offer a path to peace and purpose, lighting the way through life's challenges. I encourage you to keep exploring God's Word. There's always more to discover, more ways to grow closer to Him. As you continue your spiritual journey, may you find rest for your soul and joy in God's presence. Let His love and wisdom shape your days, bringing you closer to the life He has planned for you. Thank you for joining us on this journey through the 10 Commandments as told in the Bible. Please like this video if you enjoyed it and consider subscribing to our channel to join our community and for more videos like this. Now I wish you a peaceful and blessed sleep, and I'll see you on the next video. May God bless you.